It's a beautiful morning out there today, beautiful day. Today we are going to start a new 4-week sermon series leading us up into our Easter time. And I've called this sermon series Remembering Our Roots, and just looking back at our roots as Christians. One of the things that you will notice that happens in our lives, the things and concepts that once used to be amazing to us become routine after a while. If you look at your life, things that become more commonplace in your life, you used to think were just unreal and amazing. Now just are like, no big deal. For instance, a baby. Think about a baby. How many of you have seen at least 20 babies in your life? Okay? We see babies all the time, to the point now that I'm 40 and I see a baby and I go, yeah, they look like little aliens, but yeah, it's a new baby, all right? That's what babies are. They're not things that necessarily impress you anymore because you've seen them so many times. But let me remind you of this. A baby starts with just 2 cells, okay? 2 cells, 2 single cells that get together. And within 9 months, when that baby is born, it is made up of 26 billion individual cells. Starts with 2, and within 9 months, it's made up of 26 billion individual cells that come out as a baby. Is that not unreal? That is utterly amazing. The human, a 26-year-old human is made up of 50 trillion cells. 50 trillion cells. Sometimes, because it's become so normal to us, we forget how amazing it really is. A tree. Think about it. You drive down the street every day. Every time we walk out here, you see trees everywhere. We don't think about it anymore unless we're climbing it or whatever, but we're not in awe of a tree anymore. But think about a tree. A tree, every one of them starts with a seed that's a little speck. And you stick it in the earth and some dirt, add a little water, expose it to some sunlight, and within 15 years, you have that from this. Okay? It's become routine, and we just go, no big deal. But if you think about it, you go, that's amazing, but we've gotten so familiar with it. The internet. Think about the internet. We've just gotten familiar with it. We are connected to it all the time, but if you remember just 25 years ago, we were getting all of our information from encyclopedias. Remember, 25 years ago, if you had to go again for information, you either went to the library, or if you were lucky enough, you owned a set of encyclopedias at home, and you would look through for that topic in your encyclopedia and find it. And now today, we have vast amounts of information about anything you could ever want on the internet, and you just type it in, and you will get millions of web pages that will try to explain it to you. That's an amazing thing that we've just gotten comfortable with in our lives. Your cell phone. How many of you have a cell phone right now on you? Okay? Think about this. I just gave you a picture. There's only like 8 items up there. This thing on average for most of us has probably replaced at least 40 items we used to have 20 years ago. Calculators, cameras, watches, pagers, music things, your laptop. These little things in your pocket now have replaced all those things. They're in one little gadget, and it does it better than all those things used to do them before. And they sit in your pocket, and you can hold them in the palm of your hand and just go, I can mess with it with whatever. We look at these, and we're not so impressed anymore. We're looking for, like, what's the new little thing they're going to do? This is amazing. If I were to tell you 20 years ago, you would have this. Stunning, amazing, but we've gotten familiar with it. Last thing, for just an example, this is an airplane. We see planes fly all the time. How many of you have flown in the last year? This is what's amazing to me. We get on, we think, no big deal. I fly wherever, I get on my plane, I go, do you understand a plane is just a huge chunk of metal that we stick up in the air? It floats in the air. That's what a plane is. It's a huge chunk of metal and a bunch of us floating in the air. Now, we've gotten so used to it, it doesn't amaze us. But that's an amazing feat. It's an amazing thing if you take time and step back and go, oh my goodness, that is amazing. The process of getting familiar with the amazing around us and minimizing our respect for those things, it also carries over to our spiritual lives as well. And that's where I'm concerned. We forget how overwhelming the concept of God is. We forget about the significance of who we are. We forget about what we really deserve as God's created beings. We forget about how amazing the gift is that we have received from our Creator because we've just gotten so familiar with it. So for the next 4 weeks, what I'm going to do is try to help us remember our roots spiritually in order to help us remember just how amazing God is. And I think it's something we've gotten so familiar with, we forget about it. Because unlike a tree or the internet or your cell phone or flying in a plane, it matters if you are continually amazed by God. It means something. Those other things don't care if you remember where they came from. God does. God cares greatly about that. And remembering our roots and being amazed by them rather than minimizing them will make a huge, significant impact on our spiritual lives as well when we remember back to our roots. So, today we're going to remember our roots and we're going to remember who God is. We're just going to look at who God is. And the thing is we've gotten so familiar with this concept and understanding and just acceptance of God that we become comfortably numb to remember how overwhelming the concept of God truly is when you think about it. So I'm hoping today that I can help you get some of that overwhelming feeling back and some of that amazement back of who God is and remembering that there is a creator that created everything. So the first thing to do that is we have to remember this. We have to remember that God is eternal. And this is where the amazement of God starts, is remembering back to the fact that he is eternal. Now, this is a concept that is not just a concept you have to accept and you choose to accept or you choose to go, yeah, I believe that. What I want you to understand this morning is this. The concept that God is eternal is a logical conclusion. It's a factual conclusion. Being someone who didn't believe in God for a lot of years in my life, this is a tough thing for me to say because I have to look back at myself and go, I wasn't logical and I was kind of an idiot for denying it. But just looking at logic, you understand that God, that there's an eternal God, is just a logical, factual thing that has to take place. I'm going to show you a slide up here to help you kind of understand this. And here's kind of the logic of it. Created myself, thank you. Look at those skills on my PowerPoint, okay? There we go. Let me explain to you what this is doing up here to help you understand the logic of the fact that God is eternal. What we have right now in science is you start off with a thing called the Big Bang. Okay? And the reason the theory of the Big Bang came about is they started to discover that our universe is actually expanding, that it's not just sitting still, it's expanding. So the minute they realized it was expanding, they concluded, well, there had to be a point that made it start expanding from. There had to be a central point, and that became the Big Bang, which is where it all blew up and started expanding from. So we got this theory called the Big Bang, and we go, that's how everything started. And what we do in the scientific community is go, we have no need for a God anymore because we have this theory of the Big Bang. So we don't have to believe in a God. We can say there is no God, but there's a Big Bang, except they started to discover that the universe isn't eternal. And they've realized now through science that they can't claim that the universe is eternal like they used to at one point. They used to think it was a continual repetition of Big Bangs blowing up and then it ending in another Big Bang and then it's sucking back in and back and forth. But science has now shown it's not eternal. So we had the Big Bang, but the thing you have to understand when you have the Big Bang is you have to ask this question. What came before that? What started, if you've been here at this church before, you've thought this through, you've heard me say this before, but you had the Big Bang and you have to ask the natural question, well, what came before the Big Bang that led to the Big Bang? And the best thing that we get right now from science is they would say there were gases, and these gases eventually crunched in on themselves into a little ball, to a little speck, and that speck became so just imploding on itself that it blew back up, and it became the Big Bang. And you go, great, that sounds good. These gases got together, and they focused down to such an extent that they blew up and created the universe, and you had the Big Bang. And here's the deal. Even if that's true, the question you still have to ask is, what came before the gases? And then you get to the question mark point, which is this. Nobody has an answer. Nobody can give you anything. They can give you things like string theory and all these things are just crazy, just philosophies that people come up with. But scientifically, no one can give you an answer of what came next. And let's say somebody can. The natural question is this. What came before that? And no matter how many of these answers you get, that's why I put these small arrows at the bottom, is you can do this multiple times and keep going back. And what you start to figure out as a human, this is where I go, it's logical. You can't always say there was a start to a start to a start to a start, and there's always a start. At some point, you have to accept there's something that doesn't have a start that started the first start. Is that not a comment? Okay? What we do is we call this God. At some point, you have to say there's something without a start. And if it doesn't have a start, it doesn't have an end, we call that eternal. Now, this is a logical step, even though it's foreign to us because we can't fully comprehend what it means not to have a start or an end, but it's the only logical conclusion you can come to because you cannot live with always going, what came before that, what came before that, what came before that, because you realize that can't go on forever. You have to at some point go, something started that whole chain. And that's where we get the concept of an eternal God, that God is eternal. Now, here's what's fascinating and a really neat thing. The God who describes himself in the Bible uses descriptions of himself that fit the logic we know has to be true, that there is an eternal God. Let me point these out to you. The first one, this is amazing. The second book of the Bible in Exodus, God uses a man named Moses to rescue these people called the Hebrews who were enslaved by the Egyptians, to rescue them. And so he calls this man Moses, who is insecure, doesn't feel like he has the ability to actually do what God's called him to do. And basically he's fighting with God to go, I can't be the guy you use. And in part of that conversation in chapter 3 of Exodus, it says this. It says, but Moses protesting to God. He says, if I go to the people of Israel and tell them, the God of your ancestors has sent me to you, they will ask, what is his name? He's going, okay, you're going to send me back to these people, and they're going to go, then who sent you? And he's going, I tell them. Some guy talked to me from the sky? What do I tell them? And he says this. He says, then what should I tell them? God replied to Moses, I am who I am. Say this to the people of Israel. I am sent me to you. The God of the Bible describes himself. He says, what's your name? What do I tell him who sent me? And he says, you just tell him, I am sent you. What do you call over on this side of the screen? Something without time. I am. I don't have a start. I don't have a finish. I just am. People will always get caught up with this thought. They go, well, who started God then? Where did God come? God didn't come from anywhere. God just exists. He is. The God of the Bible is that eternal thing. He is the one, and he says, I just am. You can't comprehend starts and finishes. You can't comprehend eternity. Here's how you comprehend it. I am. So Moses says, who do I tell him sent me? Tell him that I am sent you. The eternal thing that logically we know exists. Tell him that's who spoke to you, who sent you. In Jude verse 25, it reads this. It says, all glory to him who alone is God, our Savior through Jesus Christ our Lord. All glory, majesty, power, and authority are his before all time and in the present and beyond all time. Amen. You have the author here going, I understand this logical conclusion that God just is. He's eternal. He's before time started. He's after time ends. He's beyond the present. He just is. In John 8, 57 and through 59, what you find here is Jesus is in a debate with the religious scholars. And he makes a point at one point. He says, I remember Abraham. I saw Abraham. And they're amazed at this because they're going, how did you see Abraham? Because he lived, 1,400 years before this. And it says, the people said, you aren't even 50 years old. How can you say you have seen Abraham? Jesus answered, I tell you the truth, before Abraham was even born, I am. Okay, at that point, they picked up stones to throw at him. At that point, they go to kill him. You just claimed you are God. They understood it. Jesus, who we know from eternity, we covered a few weeks ago, Jesus, who is God, uses the exact same name for who he is. He says, before Abraham, I am. I am. I'm Jesus and I am. I am the I am. I am the eternal God that exists. In Revelations 22:13, Jesus says this. He says, I am the Alpha and the Omega. Just real quick, that is the first letter of the Greek alphabet and the last letter of the Greek alphabet, which is what these people reading at the time would have been speaking. He says, I am the Alpha, I am the Omega. I am the first, I am the last, the beginning and the end. Jesus describes himself, again, as the eternal God. And for us to be amazed by God, the first thing that we have to remember is he is eternal. He's not a finite creature like us. He doesn't have a start. He doesn't have a beginning. He is beyond anything we can grasp to the point that he just is. And that's where it starts. The second thing we need to remember then is this, that God is the intelligent creator of everything we can conceive. He is the intelligent creator of everything we can conceive. Let me just give you some information about our universe that we know scientifically right now, okay? Here's some things. To the visual eye, naked eye, if you just go out in the night sky and look up to the night sky, you can see somewhere around 3,000 stars on any given night. You could go out, and if you counted them, you could see, if you can count the dimmest ones with your naked eye, you could see about 3,000 stars. If you use a small telescope, so if you go to Toys R Us or something and buy one of those kid telescopes that you can set up in your backyard, you can increase that 3,000 to about 100,000. So with the smallest telescope, a cheap little telescope, you can see about 100,000 stars in the night sky. In the Milky Way, it's estimated there's about 100 billion stars. Okay? Not a million, 100 billion in the Milky Way galaxy, just in our galaxy, 100 billion stars. There's estimated to be about 100 billion galaxies. So real quick, there's 100 billion stars in our galaxy. It's estimated somewhere around, you're seeing different galaxies up there, it's estimated somewhere around 100 billion galaxies exist in the known universe, okay? Now, on top of that, it's estimated, this number you can't even really comprehend, it's estimated there are 10 billion trillion stars in the observable universe. What that is 10 to the 22nd power. It's 10 with 22 zeros behind it. That's how many estimated stars are believed to exist in the known universe that we can observe. Okay? Is that not overwhelming? 10 with 22 zeros after that. Now, here's a better understanding of that. That is more than the number of grains of sand that exist on the planet Earth. Okay? So if you go to a beach, each little grain of sand, that number I just gave you about the number of stars in the universe, that exceeds, if you take every piece of sand on the entire planet of Earth, it exceeds that number. That's how many stars they assume are in the universe. Is that not overwhelming? Okay, now let me give you stuff that's even more overwhelming than that. On top of all that, it is finely tuned to a place that you can't comprehend. There are several different laws that seem to regulate the existence of our universe. I'm going to give you 3 of them. There's a lot more than this, but there's 3 that I want to point out. One is called the gravitational constant. What the gravitational constant is, it's the amount of pressure that 2 pieces of mass put on each other and cause gravitational pull on each other. And there's a uniform constant that they have found in the universe. They represent that by the number 10 to the 60th power. That means 10 with 60 zeros after it, okay? And here's what they have found scientifically. If that number is off by one digit, my finger, 10 with 60 zeros off after it. If it's off by 1, either way on the mark, the universe doesn't exist. If it's off on this side, the universe expands to the point that it's just gone. If it goes off to the other side, it condenses and implodes. If it's off 1 out of 10 out of 60 zeros after it, off 1, the universe ceases to exist. There's another one called the expansion rate constant. And what that is it actually works with the gravitational constant. It's expansion, which is things expanding, and the 2 work together to keep the expansion rate consistent and moving at a consistent rate so it doesn't keep accelerating. That number that describes that is 10 with 120 zeros. Okay, now I'm just telling you this because you can't comprehend this. 10 with 120 zeros, okay? A million has 9 zeros. This is 1 with 120 zeros. Numbers we can't assume or even comprehend. If that one's off one way on that out of 10 with 120 zeros, the universe doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. Another one is called this. This is the mass and energy distribution constant. And what they have found is the amount of mass and energy in the universe, how it's uniformly spread out throughout the universe, and how it is just kind of spread out all over the place. They give that number, this number, I don't even know how to describe myself. The number they use mathematically for that one is 10 to the 10 to the 123rd. Now what that means is 10 with 10 zeros after it, then do that 123 more zeros with that 10 with the 10. It would fill this whole stage with zeros, okay? You take that one, you move it by one from where it is in our universe right now, the universe ceases to exist. On top of that, all these have to work together in harmony to keep the universe existing, that it's actually existing the way it does, and we're all here, and that the universe actually exists like up in that picture. 1 off in any of those, and there's like 60 of these measurements, and any of them off 1, the universe ceases to exist. What you need to understand is this: everything in this universe is balanced on a razor's edge. It's balanced on a razor's edge. It is the incredible intelligence and beauty of the Creator that created this universe. When you understand it and you see those numbers, you realize, holy cow, the intelligence of this being or this Creator, I can't even comprehend. And yet we see the same stuff in the Scriptures. Listen to the Scriptures. It obviously describes Him as our Creator. In Genesis 1:1, the very beginning of the Bible, it says, in the beginning, God created, the eternal God, created the heavens and the earth. In Psalms 19:1, it says, the heavens proclaim the glory of God. The skies display His craftsmanship. All right? In Romans 1:20, it says, for ever since the world was created, people have seen the earth and the sky. Throughout everything God has made, they can clearly see His invisible qualities, His eternal power, and His divine nature. What the author of Romans here is saying is this: if you would just go and look at the sky and the stuff around you, you can't deny the existence of God. Because it goes on here to say, and because of that, no one has an excuse to deny God. That if you would just turn your brain on for a second and use a little common sense and logic, you would realize how incredible this God is that created everything, who He is, and how incredible it is in some of His qualities. In Colossians 1:16-17, it says this: everything was created through Him, and this is a reference to Jesus. Everything was created through Him and for Him. He existed before anything else, and He holds all creation together. And if you look at those stats that I just gave you and think about them, the only way it explains them is some superior intelligence created it and somehow holds it together fine-tuned and keeps it balanced on that razor's edge. That's the only thing that explains it. The odds of it being anything else, they're not really odds. They just don't exist. The only logical conclusion is we have an eternal God who is so highly intelligent we can't comprehend it when you look at the creation. Let me just help you understand this a little bit more. Let me ask you a few questions. What is it that you can create on your own? How many of you have some artistic skills? Create a picture, you can create a little thing. How many of you are engineer-based? You can build some things engineering-wise. Not many engineers in here. Okay, how many of you are like me and the best you can do is you can draw stick figures? Okay, that's the rest of us, okay? That's the rest of us. I just asked you that to go, what can you create? My next question would be this: what can you really control? What can you really control? Not a whole lot. Not a whole lot. What can you hold together? What can you force to hold together when it's breaking apart? What can you force to hold together? Very little. Maybe some Legos or blocks, if they're falling apart, you can hold together for a second, and the minute you let go, they're gone. My next question would be this: what can you create from nothing? If I gave you nothing and told you to create something, what would you create for me? Nothing, because you're failures. Okay? Nothing. No, you would create nothing. My last question would just be this: what can you speak into existence? What can you just with words speak into existence and create it and make it happen? Oh, good job, Megan. Way to try to give an answer to it. So, no, but here's the point. When you think about what we're capable of compared to what we see in the creation, do you realize how insignificant our power is and how incredible His intelligence and His power truly is? It puts things in perspective when you compare yourself compared to the Creator. It makes you go, I'm overwhelmed. I'm overwhelmed. But finally, to remember the awe and the amazement of God, the last thing we need to remember is this, and it might be the most amazing thing of all of them is this, is that eternal, intelligent God cares for us. He's caring. That might be the most amazing thing. He's eternal, which is He just is. He doesn't need us. We don't provide Him anything He has to have. He is the eternal Creator. He is vastly intelligent, superior intellect to anything we can even comprehend, even the smallest minute touch of it to even understand. Vastly superior to us. But yet this God who's eternal and vastly superior in intelligence cares for us. And that is simply amazing. Let me just read you 3 scriptures talking about Genesis 1 in the creation account. It says this: so God created human beings in His own image. In the image of God, He created them. Male and female, He created them. Then God blessed them. Okay? God cares about us. John 3:16, I'm not going to read the whole thing. I just want to read the very beginning. It just starts with, for God so loved the world. The world, us. For God so loved us. Jeremiah 29:11. God is speaking to Jeremiah, but he's speaking to a human being just like us. And he says this to Jeremiah. He says, for I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. They are plans for good and not for disaster, to give you a future and to give you a hope. The eternal, intelligent God of this universe looks at a guy named Jeremiah and goes, I got a plan for you. One human being in time that's on this planet looks at this guy and says, I have a plan for you, and it's good, not for bad, and I have it for you. That God cares that much about us. That is stunning to me. It is an overwhelming concept to me because I realize this. I'm yet a speck. And this God cares for me. It makes no sense to me. But yet that's what we see in the biblical narrative. That's what we see in science and the design of things. That's what it seems is everything here is to sustain us because this God cares for us. Okay? Here's how I want to wrap things up this morning is this. I want you to remember your roots. I want you to remember the greatness of God. I want you to allow yourself again to be in awe of his greatness and his splendor and his majesty because it will change your daily walk with God. So here's what I would ask you to do this week. I have a little piece of homework. It's very simple. What I want you to do this week is this. At some point, go outside. It's a beautiful day today, so it'll be warm out tonight. Go outside sometime and stare up into the sky for about 2 minutes. Okay? And you'll see something similar to this. Maybe not as beautiful, depending on if you live too close to the lights of the city here, or if you live out in the country somewhere, you'll be able to see a little bit better or not. But even in the city, you'll see some of the bright ones. Stare up into the vastness of space and just look at it. Give it a couple minutes. And here's what I want you to do. As you're doing that, I want you to remember how small you are as you stare up to that. And I actually want you to go beyond that. I want you to feel small. I want you to feel insignificant. And here's why. When you remember how small and insignificant you are, you will actually find how valuable you truly are. Because you will realize how small and insignificant, yet that Creator cares for me. And that's where you will find your true value in life. Not through people around you, not through owning things that are around you. You realize that when that Creator who can control and hold all that together values you, when you feel small, find value. That's what I'd ask you to do this week. Be in awe of the greatness of God. Be inspired by how great he is again. Something that you've taken for granted. Be reunited with that and just realize, man, it is unbelievable who the God we serve truly is. Would you pray with me?